A sweet young woman flees her stepmother and is hit by a powerful millionaire. The rain poured down on Savannah that night, hammering against the tin roof of the small attic room Sophia Marquez had called home for the past 6 months. She sat quietly by the window, clutching the worn handle of her suitcase, her eyes fixed on the murky darkness beyond. In front of her lay two choices: stay and sink deeper into despair, or step outside, not knowing where the road might lead. Her father had passed away 6 months earlier, leaving a void nothing could fill. Just weeks after the funeral, her stepmother, Lorraine, had sold the family home and every keepsake belonging to Sophia's late mother, including the antique violin her mother had given her on her 10th birthday. Lorraine made it clear Sophia would be sent to live with a distant relative in the suburbs, to learn how to take care of yourself. Words that felt like a sentence to exile. Sophia knew all too well. Staying would mean living under cold stares and biting remarks for the rest of her days. So when the clock struck midnight, she rose silently and pulled her small suitcase toward the door. Inside were a few simple clothes, $500 saved from tutoring violin lessons, and her one true treasure, the old violin she'd managed to hide before her stepmother sold everything else. She descended the creaking wooden stairs, holding her breath with every protesting groan from the floorboards. The house was pitch dark, filled only with the sound of rain falling on the porch roof. As the old front door swung open, a rush of cold wind swept in, carrying the scent of wet earth and the distant tang of sea salt. Sophia inhaled deeply, letting the chill seep into her lungs. The street before her was deserted, washed in the dim gold of streetlights reflecting off the slick pavement. She rolled her suitcase along the sidewalk, the wheels scraping softly against the red brick path. Each step made her heart beat faster, not from fear, but from the intoxicating sense of freedom unfurling before her. At the Greyhound station, Sophia bought a ticket to Charleston, South Carolina. She had no plan, no contacts there, but the name painted an image in her mind. Cobblestone streets, warm cafes, and music drifting from street corners, a place where she might start over. Sinking into a plastic seat in the waiting area, she opened her violin case and brushed her fingertips over the scratched wooden surface. She drew the bow gently across the strings, letting a soft, tender note escape, blending with the rain tapping against the glass. In that moment, she made herself a promise. No matter what lay ahead, she would never abandon her music. The only thing still connecting her to her mother's memory. The only thing that made her feel truly alive. The bus arrived with the steady rumble of its engine. Sophia climbed aboard, choosing a window seat, placing her suitcase at her feet, and keeping her violin safely on her lap. As the bus pulled away, she turned for one last look at Savannah. The city lay drowned in rain, streetlights glimmering like tears trapped in the dark. She faced forward. The night outside was now a vast black curtain, but somewhere beyond it, Sophia believed, a new scene was waiting. And in Charleston, perhaps, she would find a reason to smile again. The next morning in Charleston was bright and warm, as if the city had decided to welcome Sophia with a gentle beginning. Golden sunlight streamed through the branches of ancient oak trees, casting shimmering patches across the red brick streets. Sophia walked slowly, pulling her small suitcase, her eyes wide as she took in the unfamiliar beauty around her. She wasn't in a rush to find a place to stay. Instead, she let her feet lead her past quaint little cafes with outdoor wooden tables, flower shops bursting with color, and the scent of freshly baked pastries mingling in the air. A faint sound of jazz from a street corner made her smile. For a moment, she felt she had truly left the past behind. A few streets away, Caleb Donovan was behind the wheel of his sleek black Cadillac, heading toward a major hotel for an urgent meeting with business partners. The dashboard clock flashed 8:15 a.m., later than he'd planned. He pressed the accelerator lightly, his mind running through the details of the contract. Turning a corner, Caleb caught sight of a figure stepping into the crosswalk. A pale blue coat, chestnut curls tossed over her shoulder, a suitcase rolling alongside her. It all registered in an instant, and then the brakes screeched. The Cadillac came to a stop barely a step away from Sophia. She froze, her heart pounding. The suitcase tipped over, and her violin case slid onto the brick pavement with a dull thud. The driver's door swung open. A tall, broad-shouldered man stepped out. His perfectly tailored gray suit hugged his frame, his dark hair tousled by the wind, and his steel blue eyes sharp yet clouded with genuine concern. "Are you hurt?" His voice was deep and clear, nothing like the half-hearted apologies Sophia had heard from strangers before. I'm fine," she replied, still startled. She bent to pick up her violin case, checking for scratches. Caleb noticed the way her eyes softened at the touch of the instrument, as if it were the most precious thing she owned. "Let me help," he said, righting her suitcase and handing it back. "I didn't see you in time. My apologies." Sophia was ready to smile politely and walk away, but Caleb spoke again. "At least let me buy you a coffee. I might feel a little less guilty." She hesitated. Instinct told her not to accept an invitation from a stranger, especially one who had just stepped out of a luxury car, radiating quiet authority. But his eyes, cool on the surface, held a rare sincerity. "Just one cup," Sophia said cautiously. Caleb's lips curved into a faint smile, one that made his face unexpectedly warmer. "Perfect. There's a place right on the corner." They walked together to the cafe. Inside, the warm aroma of roasted beans wrapped around them, mingling with the low murmur of conversations. Caleb pulled out a chair for Sophia, a gesture she hadn't received in a long time. He ordered 2 cappuccinos and buttery croissants, ignoring her small shake of the head. "So, you just got to Charleston?" Caleb asked, his tone easy but his eyes searching for the missing pieces of a story. Sophia nodded. "I arrived last night. Business or—" "No," she cut in, then paused, unwilling to say too much. "I just needed a change." Caleb didn't press, only nodded slightly. His gaze flicked to the violin case beside her chair. "You play?" "Yes, I teach." Her voice softened as she spoke of music. "I hope I can find work here." Something flickered in Caleb's expression. Interest mixed with a thought even he hadn't fully formed yet. He took a sip of his coffee, but his mind was already turning toward an offer he was about to make. Caleb leaned back slightly, studying Sophia as if he were reading invisible notes drifting around her. She didn't boast, didn't try to impress, yet there was something about her that made him want to understand her more deeply. "Have you found a place to stay yet?" he asked, his tone casual, but his eyes anything but. Sophia shook her head. "Not yet. I was thinking of renting a room or finding a short-term dorm. I just got here, and I'm not sure where to start." Caleb tapped his fingers lightly against his coffee cup, a habit he had when thinking. He knew Charleston wasn't an easy place to find affordable housing, especially for someone new with no connections. "I have a house by the coast," he said slowly. "Technically, a villa. There's an entire wing upstairs that's almost never used. If you'd like, you could stay there temporarily. No rent until you find work and get settled." Sophia blinked, her long lashes trembling slightly. "I appreciate it, but we just met." "That's true, and I don't expect you to trust me right away." Caleb leaned forward, his voice dropping lower. "But I think sometimes opportunities come from chance encounters. And the house has a music room, even an old piano." Sophia's eyes lit up, then quickly softened. "Why me?" Caleb gave a faint smile. "Maybe because I see something in you. Something I used to know. And because I know that if someone carries an instrument with them on an unplanned journey, that person needs music the way they need air." She stayed quiet, her fingers instinctively brushing the violin case beside her. Part of her mind remained cautious, but another part, the part of her heart tired from loss, wanted to believe. "I don't want to be a burden." "You wouldn't. In fact, it would be better for me to have someone there to fill the silence in that house." Sophia gave a small smile. "Do you always persuade people with reasoning like that?" "No, only when I really want them to say yes." A pause stretched between them. Finally, Sophia gave a small nod, like a tentative note breaking the quiet. "Just temporarily." "Just temporarily," Caleb repeated, though his eyes promised something more. A few hours later, when Sophia stepped into the coastal villa Caleb called home, she realized his morning offer was more than just a place to stay. The grand foyer opened with high ceilings, sunlight spilling through wide glass panes onto dark hardwood floors, Every detail, from the walnut banister to the oil paintings on the walls, spoke of quiet elegance without ostentation. Caleb led her upstairs, stopping before a pair of white double doors. "This room's been empty for a long time. I hope it suits you." The room was spacious, its windows opening toward the sea. The scent of salt and a cool breeze swept in, carrying the distant sound of crashing waves. Sophia set down her suitcase, her fingers brushing the window frame as if to memorize the feeling. "The music room's at the end of the hall," Caleb said, his tone casual but his eyes watching her closely. Sophia stepped inside. The space was filled with light, sheet stands neatly lined up, a few guitars hanging on the walls. In the center stood a grand piano draped in deep blue velvet, as if waiting to be awakened. She approached, lifting the cover. The polished wood reflected the afternoon glow. Sophia placed her hand on the keys, pressing one softly. The note resonated warm and smooth, like a gentle voice breaking a long silence. Caleb leaned against the doorway, his hands in his pockets. "My mother used to play this piano. After she passed, I never touched it again." Sophia looked back at him. There was a trace of quiet grief in his eyes. "Would you like me to play?" He nodded. She sat down, setting her violin aside, and let her hands glide across the keys. The first melody rose, soft, warm, like a greeting. Caleb closed his eyes, letting the music fill the empty spaces in his chest. When the piece ended, he opened his eyes and stepped into the room. "Maybe you could help me get reacquainted with music." Sophia smiled, her eyes reflecting the sunset outside the window. "Music never left you. You just closed the door on it." Caleb gave a slight nod as if conceding the truth. And in that moment, between the sound of waves and the scent of the ocean breeze, they both knew something had begun, not just a song. The days that followed settled into a gentle rhythm. Mornings spent walking along the shore, afternoons teaching a handful of young students in town, and evenings returning to the villa to play music with Caleb. The piano and violin blended like two pieces of a puzzle reunited after years apart. Even with his demanding business schedule, Caleb always made time for those evenings, as if music had unlocked a door he had long kept closed. But that rare peace didn't last. One May morning, while Sophia was practicing in the music room, a knock echoed through the hall. Caleb opened the door, and the past stepped in, wearing a cold, calculated smile. Vanessa Cole entered the villa's grand hall as if it still belonged to her. A deep crimson dress clung to her slender frame, the click of her heels marking a deliberate rhythm on the polished wooden floor. Her smile was sharp as a blade, her gaze scanning every detail as though searching for a weakness to strike. "It's been a while, Caleb." Her voice rang out like a note strung too tight. Caleb straightened, his eyes calm but his jaw set. "Vanessa, I thought we'd said everything we needed to last year." "Yes, but I'm here today for business." She tilted her head slightly, as if her return were the most natural thing in the world. "A partner of mine wants to discuss collaborating with your restaurant group." Sophia stood at the end of the hallway, violin case in hand. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but there was something in Vanessa's tone, familiar yet cold, that made her pause. Vanessa turned, her eyes sweeping over Sophia from head to toe. A smile flickered across her lips, but it wasn't a welcoming one. "And this is..." "Sophia," Caleb replied curtly. "She's staying here temporarily." "Temporarily," Vanessa echoed, letting out a soft, knowing laugh. "I remember you said the same about me, and a few others before that." The words were light as air, but they landed in Sophia's heart like a stone. After Caleb and Vanessa moved into his study, Sophia sat alone in the music room. The word temporarily echoed in her mind, tangled with the fact that Caleb rarely spoke about their future. They played music together, dined together, but he had never once spoken about what's next. That afternoon, when Caleb returned from the meeting, Sophia couldn't hold back. "Have you helped other women the way you've helped me?" Caleb hesitated, then said, "Yes, but..." The "but" hung in the air, unfinished. Sophia waited, but he only sighed and turned away, as if searching for the words but unable to find them. In that moment, the silence became its own answer, and it aligned perfectly with the story Vanessa had just planted in her mind. Sophia nodded slightly, though she didn't look at him. I see. Her voice was even, but inside, a door had just closed. That night, the ocean's waves seemed to crash farther away than usual. Sophia lay in bed, eyes wide open in the dark, listening to the space between the waves, an emptiness that felt exactly like Caleb's silence earlier that day. In the early morning, pale sunlight slipped through the curtains into Sophia's room. Downstairs, Caleb was still asleep, unaware that upstairs she was quietly packing her things. The small suitcase rattled softly as she folded a few sets of clothes, her music notebook, and finally her violin. The one thing she placed inside slowly, as if afraid to shatter the memories it carried. On the desk, she left a small piece of paper. Thank you for everything. Don't look for me. When the villa's gates closed behind her, Sophia paused. The early breeze carried the salt of the sea, its sharpness blurring her vision. For a heartbeat, her fingers tightened on the suitcase handle, as if some unseen thread tugged her back. But then, with a slow breath, she stepped forward, the sound of wheels against cobblestone blending with the distant crash of waves, a farewell she would not turn back to witness. That afternoon, Caleb returned, pushing open the music room door as he always did. But instead of the sound of a violin greeting him, there was only silence. The chair was empty. The corner where Sophia kept her case was now just a shadowed space. He saw the note on the piano. At first, Caleb skimmed it, thinking perhaps she had gone away for a few days. But the words, "Don't look for me," cut into his chest like a blade. He read it again, and again, his hand clenched until the paper crumpled in his grip. The days that followed saw him vanish from the world. The office sent dozens of emails about missed important meetings. His phone rang constantly, but he never answered. Projects were abandoned mid-stride. By day, he wandered along the shoreline, his eyes vacant, scanning the crowd for a familiar figure. By night, he sat before the piano, his hands resting on the keys but unable to summon a single note. Sometimes his fingers pressed a few scattered keys, but the melody would falter almost immediately, replaced by a long, heavy sigh. Maria, the elderly housekeeper, tried again and again to coax him. "Sir, if you keep sitting here, she'll only get farther away." Caleb didn't respond, but in his bloodshot eyes a faint spark flickered, not of peaceful hope, but of absolute resolve. He would find Sophia, even if it meant turning the entire city upside down. 3 days later, as dawn painted the sea in gold, Caleb stepped out of the villa with a small backpack and a determined gaze. This time, he wasn't leaving the house for work. He was leaving to find the piece of his heart that had gone missing. On day one, he combed through Charleston the way only someone intimate with every street could. He hit the cafes where artists gathered, scanned community boards for music postings, and asked front desks at small inns whether a girl carrying a violin had checked in. Every shake of the head lowered something inside him by one beat, but he only nodded, thanked them, and moved on. At night, Caleb returned to the riverfront, watching lights scatter across the water and wondering at which exact moment he had let his chance slip. On day two, he drove the coastline, Isle of Palms, Sullivan's Island, Folly Beach, a salt-washed arc where the surf became the region's slow heartbeat. Wherever there were lessons, he stopped. Wherever there were music shops, he went inside. A young clerk at a tiny store vaguely remembered. A brunette with a violin asked about kids' enrollments, but she left. Caleb kept going. That night, he fell asleep in his car, back against the seat, one hand on the wheel, as if, by closing his eyes, he could drive straight into wherever Sophia was. By the afternoon of day 3, the rain had rinsed the sky clean. Caleb reached Seabrook Island, a small town of wooden porches facing the marsh, where gulls skimmed low like tireless messengers. He was about to stop at a gas station for directions when a thin ribbon of music drifted from a cottage by the water. On the door hung a chalkboard sign, "Violin Lessons, Ms. Sophia." Caleb stood beneath the cracked open window. Inside, Sophia sat among 6 children, patiently correcting each finger, each bow. Late sun poured over her hair, radiating the very peace he craved and feared to touch. A boy squeaked the wrong note. She smiled gently and said, "It's okay, try again. Music doesn't leave you. It waits for you to find your way back." The sentence went straight through Caleb like a reminder meant for him. When class ended, the kids tumbled out, leaving behind the dust of chalk and the slap of sandals on wooden steps. Sophia stepped onto the porch, keys chiming softly in her hand. She froze at the sight of Caleb, not in shock, but in the heavy stillness of two people whose shared history filled the air between them like an unplayed chord. "You found me." Her voice was small but not cold. "I promised myself I would," Caleb said, taking a step, eyes locked to hers. "I know I stayed silent when you needed an answer. I was wrong." Sophia looked up, then down again. "I don't want to be a temporary story anymore." Vanessa didn't need to say much. Your silence did. Caleb tightened his grip on his backpack strap as if anchoring his composure. Vanessa was right about one thing. I used to open my door to people and call it helping. But she's wrong about the only thing that matters. I didn't save you. You didn't need saving. You needed air. And you turned my house into yours with music. I kept quiet not because of you, because of me. Because I'd been betrayed. Because I was afraid to promise something I wasn't sure I deserved to keep. Sophia leaned back against a porch post, letting the salt wind dry the sweat at her temple. "Then why not say it then?" "Because I thought silence would keep from scaring you," Caleb answered slowly. "Turns out silence was the fastest way to lose you." They walked down to the sand behind the cottage. The tide had pulled back, leaving trails of white shells and green ribbons of seaweed. In the distance, a dog chased a thrown stick, splashed the lip of the surf, then bounded back, so ordinary that something in Sophia's chest eased. "For 3 mornings I got up before the sun," Caleb said, his voice even as the waves. "I asked everyone, read every board, stood in places where, if I were you, I'd go. I realized something. I never doubted you. I doubted myself, whether I was good enough for you to stay." Sophia looked at him longer. In her eyes was fatigue and a careful seam of hope. "What do you want now, Caleb?" He opened his backpack and took out a small velvet box. "I've carried this since Charleston. It's my mother's ring. She took it off and strung it on a silver chain for me the day I signed my first restaurant contract. She said, 'When you're sure of something, put it where it belongs.' I haven't been sure of many things, until losing you." Caleb sank to one knee on the sand where the foam had just brushed a thin stroke across the shore. The wind tangled his hair, carrying the scent of salt between them. He opened the box, revealing a platinum ring. Its diamond not large but steady bright, like a sustained note that refuses to fade. "Sophia Marquez, will you marry me? Not so I can save you, but so we can build a house with windows always open to music and truth. I promise to say my fear before it turns into silence. I promise to let you keep teaching, to let you keep being you. I promise to ask, to listen, to make amends." The wind tugged her hair. The salt stung her lashes. Sophia remembered the evenings in Caleb's living room, the duets, the simple warm breakfasts. She also remembered the afternoon he said nothing, a gap wide enough for her to slip out of trust. "I have a condition," she whispered. "Anything. A small wedding, just the people who truly matter, and," she paused to swallow around a tightness, "we tell the truth even when the truth scares us. I want to keep my classes, stay in Charleston, keep the doors open for the kids and for music. I don't want to disappear into your world, and I don't want you to disappear into mine. I want us to walk together." Caleb looked up. The smile reached his eyes before it touched his mouth. "I agree. All of it. Small wedding, truth before silence, music before noise, and you before everything." Sophia looked at the ring, then at the man kneeling on shell-dusted sand, whose hands had once trembled on the keys the day she left. She held out her hand. "Yes." Caleb slid the ring onto her finger. It fit as if measured on the days before they knew each other's names. He stood and folded her into his arms. Not the frantic grip of fear, but the sure grounding embrace of someone who had decided to stay, no matter the storms. Somewhere beyond the surf, the horizon seemed wider, as if already making room for the life they would build together. "Thank you for giving me a second chance," he murmured into her hair. "Thank you for coming, instead of waiting," she replied. A larger wave climbed the beach and soaked the patch where Caleb had knelt. They both laughed. The last two notes that close a phrase. At the edge of town, the chalkboard sign, "Violin Lessons, Miss Sophia," swayed lightly in the breeze, nodding toward a clearer future. A small wedding, a house with a music room always open, and two people who had chosen to speak the truth before any silence. The wedding took place on an autumn afternoon in the small garden behind the coastal villa. There were only about 20 guests, family, a few close friends, and Sophia's young students. The violin of an 8-year-old girl sang as Sophia walked out, her simple white dress outshone by the light in her eyes. Caleb stood beneath an arch of bougainvillea, his smile quiet but deep, as if he had finally arrived where he truly belonged. After the ceremony, they transformed the villa into a small music school. The living room became a mini concert hall, and the upstairs music room opened its doors to children in need. Caleb dedicated a portion of his restaurant chain's revenue to scholarships and to buying instruments for the kids. Sophia taught every day, patient as she had been with the children in Seabrook, while Caleb occasionally joined in on piano for small recitals. Their new rhythm of life arrived gently but completely. In the mornings, Sophia walked along the beach, her hand resting lightly on her belly, where a small life was growing each day. In the afternoons, she taught her students, and at sunset, the two of them would sit on the porch, listening to the waves. Caleb had never imagined music could heal so much, not just for the children, but for himself. Sophia had never thought she would find a family where her heart was listened to as attentively as a melody. In those days, time seemed to slow, like a piece played not for its ending, but for each moment of its tune. And among all the sounds, the waves, the laughter of children, the piano, one thing was never absent, their laughter blending together like a perfect chord. That night, the villa glowed with light. The small concert hall was packed, from parents of students to friends supporting the scholarship fund. On stage, Sophia sat beside Caleb. She played the violin, he accompanied on piano. The melody flowed gently like waves against the shore, each note lifting the dreams of the children it was meant to help. As the piece neared its end, Sophia suddenly felt a sharp pain. She lowered her bow, her breath quickening. Caleb noticed instantly, his eyes flashing with concern. "Sophia?" She gave a faint smile, but her hand resting on her belly said everything. The audience murmured as Caleb rose, wrapping an arm around her. "I'm sorry, everyone. The concert will have to pause. We have a very special reason." Laughter and applause followed them to the car. That night, under the soft yellow lights of the coastal hospital, the first cry rang out, clear and pure like the opening note of a symphony. They named her Aria Donovan. Aria, the opening melody of a song and the new beginning of their family. Caleb held his daughter in his arms and looked over at Sophia, sweat still beading her forehead, but her eyes shining with joy. In that moment, they both knew the most beautiful piece they would ever create had just begun, and it would never end. In the years that followed, the seaside villa was not just the Donovan family's home. It became the place where music took flight. Caleb's piano, Sophia's violin, and Aria's babbling filled the air each day, blending into a song that, never repeated yet, was always as beautiful as the first time. Aria grew up between keys and strings, taught that music was not only for hearing, but for feeling, for sharing, and for healing. Sophia continued teaching. Caleb still ran his restaurant chain, but always made time for charity concerts. Together, they offered scholarships to underprivileged children, added free weekend classes, and turned their home into an open door for anyone carrying the dream of music. In the afternoons, they sat on the porch, watching Aria practice her first notes. Each sound, imperfect though it was, made them smile because it carried the heartbeat of their family. Looking back, from a chance meeting in a cafe to warm days spent side by side, Caleb and Sophia knew they had composed their own symphony, a piece that had not only highs and lows, but also rests, moments where they learned to wait, to forgive, and to love deeper. And that symphony, with Aria as its opening melody, would continue to play, not just within the walls of their home, but in the hearts of all who had ever been touched by their music.